Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on evolving association membership models. I'm so pleased you could join us, and we have a record number of people who registered for this. And I've got to admit, I'm a little bit excited because I've been working on this white paper for several years, and you're getting a bit of a sneak peek before the white paper comes out next week. So without further ado, let's kick off. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, I've been around for a very long time in the sector. My name's Belinda Moore. I've been involved in associations since 1993, and I've written a lot of books and white papers, as well as the Association Annie comic strips that you can see there on the screen. Now, I'm going to be walking through quite a lot of content today because it is a new release that's coming out. As a result, I've put a little bit more text than I'd normally put onto the slides, and we will send you out a copy of those slides afterwards so you can actually look through and remember everything we went through. You'll also get a link to the recording as well. Now, I do know we are going to be covering a lot and moving quite quickly, but I'm really happy to take questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, and you're also, of course, welcome to put any comments that you might have that isn't necessarily a question into the webinar chat. And I've got to admit, I love that stuff because it makes me think I'm not talking to a blank screen. So I want to go through what prompted this paper. When I first started working in associations, there wasn't a lot around in the way of insights or information. In fact, we didn't even have email. I still remember having an argument with my CEO at the time, who insisted that websites were a passing fad, and if I just ignored it, it would go away. And the fact is, it didn't go away. It's just become more than ever before. And one of the challenges that we had is that associations, they've been the same for a long time. We've used the same membership models for so long now, it's pretty much all we're used to. And associations weren't really open to challenging those traditions and coming up with something new. Now, what has happened, though, in the last sort of 20 to 30 years is that there's been a whole raft of technological, economic, and social changes that have converged together and completely changed the landscape we operate in. Those models that we've used for years just aren't necessarily relevant anymore. Now, before COVID, associations were really slow still to change. It was really not happening. In fact, if you've read my Association Apocalypse paper, my little secret on that one is I wrote most of that on the way home from a board meeting in Melbourne, where I was so frustrated and angry because one of the board members had yet again prevented a critical decision being made because he didn't personally like it. Now, COVID came and everything shifted. Associations were able to make change at a level that I never would have dreamed of. Things I thought were decades away were being done in months. So that was one of the silver linings. And one of the things that's been most sacrosanct about changing is this membership model. So what we've done now is I've aggregated the work we've done with a lot of clients to put a framework for you to consider how you might look at changing your membership model. Because unfortunately, for most membership models, they're kind of like an accident of history. When you ask people why things are structured in a certain way, the most common response is because we've always done it that way. And that's not good enough. So before I jump into giving you that framework, a few terms. Membership model refers to the broader framework, the business model that underpins your membership. It's not just your membership categories, which are the actual list of options you've got for membership. It's all the other factors that come together, and that's what we're going to be covering today. Things like your purpose, things like your pricing and the value that you're offering. So we'll go through that. Another element we're going to talk about today is components. Components is the term that refers to the subgroups that operate within your association, things like special interest groups, branches, that kind of thing. But onto the main framework here. So, as I said, associations have been around for a long time. They actually have a really interesting history, which is a future paper I'm working on at the moment. But essentially, they've existed for thousands of ideas, because when you strip it back, what an association actually is, it's a collective of people coming together to advance a purpose of mutual interest, whether that be a profession, an industry, or a cause, whatever it happens to be. And even as far back as in ancient Rome, the guilds pretty well ruled Rome. And the way that associations have evolved over the years has had a dramatic impact on almost every aspect of our society. And over that time, these traditional models of membership evolved. And look, they were appropriate back in the olden days. And it was a really relatively simple model. You paid an annual fee and you got your benefits back. And it was kind of like a one size fits all approach, and it tended to be quite resource heavy, which made it wasn't really easy to scale up. And it really suited a time where information was scarce and most communication was one way, like the association told the members stuff. But the fact is, everything is changing. We're not only going through the technological, economic, and social changes of the last 10 to 20 years, but now we have AI. Now, AI is changing that whole game again. We are only at the very, very, very beginning stages of AI acceleration. And from here on in, change is going to become faster and faster and faster. And we as associations need to be able to adapt to that, not only for our own longevity, but also so we can guide our members through what's coming, because it's going to be significant. But that is probably a topic for a different webinar. But essentially what's happening is we're moving to more purpose-driven, value-driven models. And they've got to actually be adaptable because things are changing. So one of the things that I did is I went through and said, well, what are the fundamentals to a membership model? Categories only being one, what are the other elements? And so we've identified these 12 elements here that pertain to every membership model. So what I want to do in the very limited amount we've got today is just walk you through each of those elements so you can see why consideration of each is so important when you're thinking about constructing a membership model that's going to be fit for purpose into the future. So you can see I've divided them into 4 sections: the foundational elements, your audience and who you're engaging with, your operational frameworks, and the value and sustainability. But for the purpose of this, we're just going to go through each of them in what I consider to be a logical order. So let's start with purpose. Purpose is the most exciting element of this because it's the foundation upon which everything else is built. As an association, you don't exist to recruit and retain members. You exist to achieve a purpose, and membership is just one of many, many tools that you've got at your disposal. And membership's not appropriate for every stakeholder. Membership's not, and having a lot of members isn't appropriate for every cause. So what we need to do is to be able to say, what is our purpose fundamentally? Why do we exist? What is it we're doing? What's the end state that we're working towards? And those are the things then that become the lens through what you, for every decision that you're going to make. And do you know what? It is important to revisit this from time to time because purposes can shift. A client of mine, Checkup in Queensland, fabulous group of people. They used to be the divisions of general practice, basically sector body, way, way back in the day when the divisions of general practice existed. Now, that organisation has evolved over time to be something completely different. Now they're about delivering health outcomes, predominantly in rural and remote regions. They've got a fantastic purpose, but it's not what they had back then. And the membership model they had back then is not appropriate now. So understanding that purpose is the first step. And every time we make a decision, we need to go back to that. But the next step is what we want to be. Now, this isn't your vision statement as such. This is actually understanding from your membership model, if everything you did was successful, what does that look like in terms of a membership model? What do we want to be when we grow up, kind of thing? And one of the ways that I've found that it's helpful to stimulate that discussion within a group is to use these archetypes that I've given here, and you might have other ones that you come in as well. But when you think of your association with unlimited funds, would you be like a Netflix, a content provider to members where they can get personalized content to exactly what they need? Or are you a LinkedIn, which is a platform upon which your members can connect with each other for purpose? Are you a mobilizer like change.org, where you go out and you give your members the tools to be able to effect change and impact by themselves? Are you like a Duolingo, the upskiller, where you provide really interactive ways to scale up your learning experience in a way that's very compelling? Or are you like an Amazon, where people can get all of the products and services that they need, not just necessarily from yourself, but potentially from other players? Are you like an Amnesty International? Are you the advocate, a powerful voice on behalf of those you serve, driving impact? And are you a Tesla? Are you like an innovator, someone who's sparking what could be in the future and driving those breakthroughs and doing things differently? And this is a really useful tool just to spark discussion, because invariably what comes out is people are like, oh, well, we're a bit from this column and a bit from this column. You can't be all of it. So what are you going to be? And find out, what does success look like in terms of achieving your purpose? Because that's the other thing to look at this through. If we're going to achieve XYZ purpose, so it might be a thriving profession, well, what do we need to do to get through that? Now, I wouldn't suggest just picking one, although in some instances it is appropriate. But for a lot of associations, they'll find that there's probably 2 with a dash of 3 involved there. So you also need to be able to prioritize. This is just a really good tool to use as a starting point to then articulate, what does success look like for us? What are we working towards with what do we want to be? And another tool for doing that is this next step. Who you are. What do you as an association identify as? Because what you are actually impacts a whole heap of discussions about your membership model and what it looks like. So there's a few different things that you can talk about here. And this is actually really important when you're thinking about the future strategy for your membership. So first of all, what type of association are we? There are so many types. I've been going through developing a whole heap of different categorization criteria for associations. But for the benefit of this group here, who is majority of these, you can be a first career professional association, which is one like lawyers, doctors, architects, where you tend to go to university, study, come out and work your way up through a career. You can be a second career professional association, which represents those associations who people tend to gravitate to later on after they've already had a first career. So that's things like the Governance Institute. Like no 5-year-old gets up one day and goes, when I grow up, I want to be a board member. These second career professional bodies have entirely different drivers and mechanisms than what first career professional associations do. I mean, look at recruitment. First career professional associations tend to recruit from universities. Second career tend to recruit in other ways. Of course, then you've got your medical colleges, trade associations, so like plumbers, which is a completely different area again from industry associations. And I know a lot of people use industry bodies and trade bodies interchangeably. You shouldn't, because they are 2 very, very different beasts. And the drivers for each are quite different. With trade associations, you're generally seeking pathways in for apprenticeships and things like that, whereas an industry association tends to represent businesses and advancing that particular industry. Of course, chambers of commerce, and one that's often not appreciated is cause-based associations. And I'll give you an example. So you have like the Sonographers Association is a first career professional body. But the Australian Society for Ultrasound in Medicine is actually a cause-based organisation because it represents the use of ultrasound. So while the members of the Sonographers Association tend to be people drawn predominantly from the profession, people who might join ASUM would go from people who run gyms, who use an ultrasound in the gym, through to allied health, through to health. The membership spread for a cause-based or a specialisation-based association tends to be quite different as to who that they're engaging. So this is actually a really important categorization to understand. And you'd be surprised how often this is a major source of contention at an association board when you're trying to understand what they are, when they can't actually agree. And are there hybrids? Yes, but a hybrid is really challenging to execute. And while a little thing I'll mention here is, while I know that professional bodies tend to have individual members and organisational bodies tend to have organisational members, we are seeing a tendency now for professional bodies to utilise organisational membership structures to be able to deliver better outcomes for their members. And a classic example of that is if you have doctors, you might have a practice membership so that you can deliver solutions to those members who own their own practice that enable a deeper level of value. But that's just one. The next thing you need to understand when you're looking at your identity is, what is our competitive position in the market? Are we the primary association for that market, or are we a secondary association? And this is a really important distinction as well, because it changes how many of those functions and activities that you undertake. Because a primary association might be the College of RACGP, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. If I want to be a GP, I'm going to go through there because I need to fellow. But what about the AMA? The AMA is what we would see as a secondary association. It's an association membership that someone might take in addition to their primary membership. Now, this actually makes putting together your membership program quite different between the two. For a primary body, you need to deliver value to members. You know you've pretty well got them in most instances, whereas a secondary body needs to deliver value that is either better than or distinct from the primary body. So understanding which of these you are is really helpful when you're crafting your value propositions and what your space is in the membership. The last one is what's your structure, because actually how your structure does have an impact as well, whether you're a single entity state-based or whether you're part of a federation, whether you're the national body of independent states. These things all impact what you do, because you need to then consider, for example, if I'm the state body within a national federation and I'm delivering value, how is that distinct to or aligned with the value that might be generated from the other areas? So it's important, if you do have those kind of relationships, to be able to be cognizant of them as you go through the process. Cool. So that's your identity, and those things are really important, because this is all of these things so far is who you are. But the next one is probably one of the most challenging for a lot of people, and that is, who do we actually serve? Because anyone could be a member of your association, but seriously, not everyone should. Membership is a time-consuming, resource-heavy kind of thing, and if you get the wrong people in the room, then the wrong people are influencing the direction of your organization. So it's really helpful to look at your ecosystem, understand who all of your stakeholders are, and determine what is the relationship that you need to have with them. And I've given this framework here, which is really helpful for understanding where people are going to sit. And I'll work through it so you can see. So serve is the serve category is those people whose opinion is paramount, those people that we are created to further their interests. So if I'm a professional association for architects, of course, I serve people who are currently working in the architecture profession. That is distinct from engage. So those are people that you collaborate with to achieve your mission. So that can be government, it can be other associations, it can be other entities or individuals. And I'll give you, I think, an example that gives you the distinction here. Remember I talked before about the Stenographers versus ASUM. If I am with the Stenographers Association, I serve people in the stenography profession. They are going to be my core members. But if I'm with the Australian Society for Ultrasound and Medicine, what I serve is a cause, the good use, the effective use of ultrasound. So if I serve the cause, who's going to be a member? And this is an instance where somebody from the engage category, so to serve that cause, I'm going to engage with everyone from the gym owners to allied health to health. Those are the people who fall into the engage category. So in that instance, it would be appropriate for someone in the engage category to be a member, because you serve a cause. That's the distinction. And generally with those you serve and those you engage with, they've got some kind of emotional or invested connection to what it is that you do. Now, how is that different from customers? A customer is somebody who has a transactional relationship with you. They buy, but they buy a one-off product. And I'll give you an example. So the Elevated Work Platforms Association, a great organization that looks after the machinery that goes up and down, the commercial machinery. Now, its members, those it serves the cause of the safe use of those machines, but it's members of the manufacturers and the big companies who use that equipment. That's who they serve and they engage with. Yet one of the objectives, one of their purposes is safety outcomes. So one of the things that they determined is to achieve these safety outcomes, we need to provide the tickets for people to be able to operate those machines, the individual operators who jump on those things every day, so that they're undertaking safe operations of those vehicles. Now, you don't want those people to be a member, because they're only coming to the association for that qualification to be able to get their ticket, to be able to operate the vehicles. So in that instance, those groups, the individual operators who want to use that machinery, are customers. They're transactional customers. They're never going to be a member. They're never going to get voting rights. But that distinction between who we serve and engage with and who we have as a customer is a really critical one to get right, because you can still generate strong revenue streams from customers. Not everyone needs to be a member to spend money with you and to engage with you. So the other two areas here are campaigns. So campaigns is generally things like to the public or to government, when you might be doing things through social media or television where you're trying to change perceptions. Those people are not going to be members. They're passive recipients of whatever information that you're trying to get out there or action that you're trying to inspire. The last one is where I often find there are challenges. I've done a lot of research projects, and one of the things that we generally find is the perspectives of vendors and the drivers for them is quite different from those that we serve and engage, of course, always with some exceptions. When a vendor engages with your organization, they want to sell their products and services or consultancy to your members or to your sector. Now, should they be a member? Do you know what? With vendors, in some instances, yes, but generally speaking, partnership or sponsorship pathways can be more effective, because there have been instances, and not naming to protect the guilty, one of the most odd campaigns I was ever involved with is where an association had about 130 what we call core members, large organizations who were members of that particular industry association. And those members were paying anywhere between $10,000 and $500,000 as a membership fee. Now, some bright spark decided at one stage that, let's put up a supplier membership, a corporate membership for people who supply products and services, and we'll chuck $1,000 on it. Well, within a couple of years, they had 500 members. Now, that caused a situation where every time you went to one of their events, there'd be one of their core members and 9 suppliers trying to sell them. So what happened? The core members stopped going. Vendor memberships should be treated very, very carefully, and any partnerships and sponsorships equally so, because you don't serve those groups. They're a means to an end. So what is it that you're seeking? Have they got information? Have they got funding? How is it they're contributing to your purpose? And then your appropriate pathway, whether it be membership or something else, can be decided then. Now, I've put here, and I'm not going to go through it because, well, we don't have enough time, but there is a really easy way, and this is in the white paper, to go through a template where you can understand, well, for each segment, what kind of value do they seek? What's the market size? How many members do we currently have there? What's our current market penetration? For those people who are members, what's our retention rate? What's the fee? How much is it worth to us per annum? And what's the potential? You can then, for each type of stakeholder group within your ecosystem, assess whether they're a valid prospect for membership and why, because it's not always about the money. Membership can achieve many outcomes. You need to assess each. That is the quickest I've ever done serve. But then once you've got that, once you understand who it is that should be a member, then we need to start thinking about how are you engaging with those people. So there's 3 different, broadly speaking, ways that you can engage. You can be traditional. So think Masons, where, it's all secret handshakes, and if you're a member, you're a member, and if you're not, go away. Then you can go into the next one, which I see here. I'll put a typo. I'll put, oh no, it's all right. Contemporary. So contemporary is where you still look like a traditional association, but you deliver it in a much more contemporary fashion. And that is for most of the associations we have today. We use emails, we have online communities, we've got different ways that we run our events that really make it a bit more than what we used to do. The next step from there is your digital. So digital is where you're like a Netflix or like a LinkedIn, where you're an online platform or an online service where everything is very, very scalable, whereas a contemporary still requires a significant amount of resource and is a little less scalable. When someone goes into digital, it's eminently scalable. So those are the 3 different styles. And I would suggest that most people that we talk to sit in the contemporary space, sometimes veering into traditional or digital, less so into digital. The next thing we look at is, for each of those, assessing where do you actually sit within that delivery style. Are you like really developing? Are you intermediate, or are you advanced? And this is a really important distinction to make, because when you're trying to figure out where you want to be, you need to figure out, well, where are we now? Where do we want to be, and what's that gap? And if you were to jump from a advanced traditional even to an intermediate contemporary, that's quite a big jump to make. So it's worthwhile sitting down when you're looking at your membership model to say, well, how do we want to engage? Do we want to keep it traditional where it's all face-to-face and you've got to be a member, or do we want to be able to move it into more contemporary formats? And how well do we want to do that? A contemporary advanced has significant marketing automation driving what they do. Their tech and data is fantastic. Their data is actually really useful in informing their actions. They're really, really switched on when it comes to that. And for many associations, advanced contemporary is a great aspiration. And one of the things that really enables these kind of engagement approaches to be effective is great processes. Now, I know this is a really detailed slide. I'm actually just giving you this to illustrate, and I've provided the notes so you can look at it after, but look at member recruitment and retention. In the old days, and I still remember those because we didn't have email or websites back then, it was all done over the phone and you'd keep a spreadsheet or a card file. But recruiting and retaining members is a process that you can optimize using automation and technology, and definitely AI. And it's only got the 7 steps in there. It's how do you generate leads for new members? Once somebody's a lead, how do you build a relationship with them as a prospect so that they actually become warm? And then what's our sales process, the process that actually converts someone from a non-member into a member? And then once they are a member, what does our onboarding look like, our new member integration? How do we take them from that transactional decision to join to that emotional decision to belong and to be part of our community, knowing that is what makes people sticky? And then, of course, once they're through their onboarding, how do we build a relationship with our members so that they perceive that they're better off as a member as a non-member? Because before we know it, that referendum on member satisfaction with only a yes or no answer comes through, which is your renewal process. So how do we optimize our renewal processes to ensure as many members as possible respond? And of course, then if people don't renew, what does our reactivation processes look like? Because it's much easier to retain a past member or to recruit somebody who's been a previous member than it is to go to the never members. So this is a wonderful warm pool. And if you set processes around that using your automation, there is so much you can achieve that's so scalable at relatively low resource requirements. So when we are looking at engagements, definitely aspire into the more advanced level. Just watching the time here. When we're looking at engagement too, engagement is about how you engage with members, but components are about how your members engage with each other. And this is an area people often overlook. This is definitely one where it's, oh, well, we've always done it that way, so why would we change? I talked before about community. So association communities aren't homogenous. They're not all the same. They're made up of lots of different tribes, and your components are a great way to help people find and connect with their tribe to build that sense of emotional connectivity to your organization, which then inspires them to maintain their membership and also to tell others about how great you are. Now, there's 4 different types of community. So first, regional, things like your branches. They're a fairly stock standard, certainly in the Australian and New Zealand markets here. Now, they're actually something which is very useful for people who want to connect within a geographic region. However, there are others. Your demographic components, that's like women in or young people or next-gen groups, that is actually on shared characteristics. The next one is expertise-based. So those are your technical groups for specialization. So, for the widget manufacturers, it might be someone who does little widgets. And the last one we call impact. So that's for the business of the association. That's for your board, people and components that are about driving the business of the association. Not all components are relevant for every organization, and it is really worthwhile sitting down to figure out which components will help us meaningfully progress our purpose. It's interesting, we've done a lot of research in this space, and we've found that there are a significant number of associations for whom the engagement with regional branches is declining, whereas the demographic and expertise components are actually growing in strength. Yet there's always those outliers where the regionals are going gangbusters. It really depends on the association and what's right for you and your members. But this is so important in building community and maintaining stickiness that a bit of work in this space can actually help dramatically enhance your retention rates. One of the things that's worthwhile to mention in here is you also want to look at your volunteering pathways, because there's only a certain percentage of your membership that's ever going to be interested in long-term, I'm going to sit on a committee type things. It's a much greater percentage of your members who'll be interested in ad hoc opportunities to get involved. So your ad hoc volunteering is actually a really great segue between an uninvolved to an involved member. So what does that look like? It might be, can you review this document? Can you sit on this committee that's helping us create a response to the government? It's only going to be 3 weeks long. It's short, sharp, purpose-orientated opportunities to get involved, and they are a critical part of this particular step, because you're figuring out, how do we want our members to be engaging? What do we want them to do? So, and I'm moving through relatively quickly, but the next step then is, once you've got all of that, is also to think about, what are the unwritten ground rules that drive the decision-making we make around membership? Because sometimes you're making decisions based on things that used to happen that don't necessarily align to achieving your purpose. So, so this is actually things, asking yourselves questions like, are we a community or a clique? Are we cause-driven or member-driven of what we do? Are we inclusive, where anyone can come play? Or are we exclusive? You got to be a member to be able to come in the door. Understanding these rules is really important, because it sets the philosophy for your entire membership program. And when we're looking at how membership programs can be structured, there's 3 different approaches. So there's your traditional approaches, where your benefits for members, if you're a member, you can come in. If you're a non-member, that door is shut. There's a participation model where it says, do you know what? We've got a strong membership, but we'll allow non-members to get involved. So imagine it's a Taylor Swift concert where anyone can come in, but your members have got the VIP backstage passes. So they still get more than your non-members, but the non-members are still in the room. Now, an open membership approach is quite different again. The door is fully open. Membership is generally free because it's subsidized through other revenue streams. And interestingly enough, there are a number of associations I'm aware of at the moment for whom membership fees are a fraction, like sometimes 3% of their overall revenue, who are considering these kind of models where they remove that requirement to pay a membership fee, and therefore the barrier to everyone that they serve engaging with them. It's really unusual for someone to jump from traditional to an open, but what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of people are on that journey as they're becoming more and more open to the participation models. And a really great example of that is the Australasian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, which previously were a traditional model, and over the last 5 years or so, they've shifted into a participation model where they've opened themselves up, their training to non-members, and it's led to significant growth. And because one of the byproducts of successful participation models is strong growth in financial members, because it works on the basis that recruiting and retaining members is, well, it's a lot like dating, and you want to show a bit of ankle, and that's what the participation model lets you do. People come in and they get involved and they do things, they start building that emotional connectivity, and that journey into paid membership is a natural evolution. So one of the things we need to understand, though, is, do we have those underlying principles that allow it? Because I'm aware of, and once again, I won't name the guilty, but there's one association that I used to be involved with where the president wouldn't allow anybody to, like, he wouldn't go in the room unless someone had a glass of Cristal waiting at the door for him. But he also didn't want to deal with student members and didn't want to deal with, like, had all of these rules because of the sense that, you know, as a member, he was better. And so it was very much a clique, an old boys club at the top. And when the staff of that association tried to bring in fresh perspectives, there was a lot of resistance. They were very stuck in a traditional model. Since then, they've changed, thankfully. But what are those principles? Who are making the decisions, and what's driving that? Because one of the last things I'll say about this is, and I know this is potentially an unpopular opinion, Associations don't exist to serve members. Associations exist to serve their purpose, and membership is one pathway to execute it. So if I'm serving a profession, I don't just serve the members of that profession, I serve the broader profession, and members just get more and a deeper relationship and a higher level of service. But that opinion isn't held by everyone, and there are still a lot of associations out there who believe they only serve their members. And in my personal opinion, that's quite limiting, with some exceptions always, but that's quite limiting. And what I can see moving on is we'll see more and more associations not just going into participation models, but more into these open models. All right. Just looking at the time, I want to go through just a couple of other areas. There are only 5 functions that an association can potentially offer. Now, each one of these has their own drivers. And when you're looking at your membership model, you want to figure out which of these are we doing? What are the most important and what don't we need to do? So the quick rundown, mobilization. So mobilization is like think GetUp, where you go out and you get your members to do something, to take action on a cause. Representation is advocacy to the public or to government. Community building, think LinkedIn, where you're a platform for helping members to connect together. Skills pathways, think the medical colleges, where somebody goes in at a lower level and they escalate up to an expert level or specialized. And service provision is when you provide products and services to your members, like conferences and publications and e-news, etc. Now, each one of those has a significant amount of resources that's required to execute it well. Now, a lot of associations will say that they do multiples of these, and that's absolutely okay. You could do all 5 if you've got the resources to do it. But when you're thinking through this, don't let it be an ad hoc decision that's just happened because you've evolved into doing all those 5. Make it a considered decision to say, well, which ones do we choose to do? And what level of resourcing or priority do we lend into these? And the reason I say this, I'm not going to go through this whole chart, but the drivers are different. And I'll give you the most easy example is if you think about advocacy. If I'm doing advocacy, I want to talk to my members and get insights that I share them with government, and then I get some action, I share that back with our members. The communication driver is that figure 8. But if you think about if I'm service provision, I'm providing members with products and services, the communication is to the member, inspiring them to uptake and reuptake and reuptake. So one of the things that means is it's fundamentally different from advocacy. But then consider if you put community, if you're there about building a strong member community, you're a platform, and the communication driver is to get members to engage, and you're simply providing the platform and the motivation to do that. So with those drivers being so different, the skill sets that your staff need to be able to execute, the technology that's got to sit behind it is different. So it's really important to know that you're making a considered and deliberate choice to deliver these functions, so then you can gear everything else in behind it. But now let's talk about categories. So membership categories is normally where this discussion starts. And for a lot of associations, it's an interesting journey to go from understanding, well, the categories might be okay, but it might be the business model around it. Generally, most categories that we come across, so we do a lot of membership model reviews, and sort of 75% of the time, the categories need tweaking. There's 25% of the time where it needs a significant change. But we always look at membership categories against these criteria to be able to assess how much they need to be shifted. So when we're looking at them, we want 1, alignment. Those categories need to align to advance the purpose. If for example, if your purpose is to execute the function of mobilization to drive change on a particular cause, and yet your membership fees are $1,000 a person, then that's not aligned, because that's going to limit the number of members, and mobilization requires a large membership base. Intuitive. Now, this is actually really important. Categories like full member, standard member, affiliate member, associate member are inherently flawed because, first of all, they carry a bias. Who's better, full member or affiliate member? Secondly, they're not intuitive. Someone can't look at those categories and immediately know where they sit. They actually have to dive down further. And so it doesn't enable people to naturally find their home. What we're looking at when we say intuitive categories, is call it what it is. Is it 0 to 10 staff? Is it student? Is it fellow? Give categories names that the cursory look through by a prospective member and they can find their home. One of the beautiful things about this is if you align your intuitive categorization against your market segments, it enables you to bundle value, because nowhere is it written that you've got to provide the same value to every single type of member that you have. You can actually tailor really focused value to specific market segments. Now, when you are looking at your categories, within that category, people have to have the common set of needs. You can't have categories that have vendors and your professionals in there together. That doesn't make any sense, because the drivers for each of those market segments is different. You've got to have your value proposition. It's got to be different from the other categories. You can't, if you've got a student category and then you've got a fellow category, don't provide the same value to both. Make it somewhat unique and differentiated. It's got to be priced in a sustainable manner that is also fair to members. So you've got to be able to deliver it. This is where technology comes in. A lot of associations are implementing technology to enable them to scale up their ability to service members, which of course enables them to reduce their costs, potentially their fees. It's also a competitive threat for other associations, because the associations that are doing that well, first thing they're doing when they figure out how to scale up is to go, right, who can we demolish in the market? But that's another presentation. They've got to be exclusive, reflecting the full diversity of the sector, administratively easy to manageable, and as much as possible, make it scalable. It's got to be as easy to service that members in that category at 100 members, as 1,000 members, as 20,000 members, of course, with some exceptions. One of the things too, if you're looking at organizational memberships, you have to keep in mind penetration. So for every organizational member, say, for example, you're looking at, I'm going to skip that. So say, for example, you're looking at an organization, you might have leaders, managers, doers. So each of those people is going to be looking for a different value proposition. So when you're going through and understanding your member categories, you need to be thinking about how can we deliver unique value to each of those categories, but also to the individuals within each category as an organizational member. One of the things that comes when we're looking at value, so I'm watching the time before I get in trouble, there's a difference between value, benefits, and features. And when you are crafting your value proposition, it's really important to speak the right language. Because if I tell you our association's great, we've got webinars, we've got a conference, we've got a magazine, and we've got regional groups that you can get involved in, those features have no inherent value, because, well, every association does that stuff. The value is about what's in it for me. So when I join your association, it's an investment in my career. It's an investment in my business. It's an investment in advancing a cause in a powerful manner. Now, the benefits is how you invest it. So if I'm a student, the value proposition that I might seek is getting the best critical first step into my career to position me to advance my career faster, further, and better than I can ever imagine. That's a wonderful value proposition. What are the benefits? Well, look, we're going to give you support to get that first step. We're going to give you the mentoring to be able to find who to talk to and build the connections. Those are benefits. The features are, we've got this book, we're running an event. Use the right language and tailor your value proposition along whatever one of the segments it is. Now, sometimes you'll find there's different segments are appropriate at different times based on their association journey, their career journey, whatever other journeys they might be on. Be open to it and have solutions and understand what are those critical transition points within their career or their business or the cause where they're going to potentially need more help from you and therefore be more sticky, and is your membership model set up to allow that? Oh, okay. So I'm going to give you, this is a really quick one, but I think this is super useful to go through. When you're doing market research, so we do a lot of market research, and we always ask two questions. How important is it that our association does the following? And how effective are we at it? And this is really useful because it overcomes that common issue we have where we'll make a suggestion saying, how about you do this? And people come back and go, well, we've tried that before. It didn't work. Well, yeah, but did it work because you were crap at it? So what this does is if you do some research and you ask these questions, first you list all the benefits down as the answer options for each. And you give people for each of those the ability to put important, very important, important, all the way through to not important at all. And what we do with this is we aggregate the very important, important, the effective and very effective to give a score out of 100. So you can see here, looking at this table, government advocacy is 83% important for everybody, but only 70% effectiveness for the association. So it says, look, it's really important, but you've got some work to do. And this is really important to do in a segmented manner, because you'll find that your vendors, big members, small members, people at different stages of the career life cycle, members, non-members, will have very different perspectives. For example, when you look at this one, you can see the effectiveness ratings from people who aren't members are remarkably low compared to the majority of people who came in. But one of the reasons is that I highly recommend doing this kind of research is when you're crafting your value proposition, if you have proposed categories, divide the research by the people who fall into those categories so you can understand what's important to them, how well you're doing at it, so you know where you can focus your limited resources to make the most impact. Alrighty, and I'm going to go through, because we have running over time now. Pricing, look, there's lots of different fee types, renewal periods, and pricing and payment options. I actually have a lot of detail on them within the membership model report, the white paper that's coming out, where you can look through, because fee types are changing significantly. This whole idea that you pay an annual fee, it's dying out, frankly. You can pay your annual fee in installments, like monthly direct debit, which is fantastic. That definitely has a really good positive impact on retention rates. But there are more and more associations who are looking at subscription models or vendor subsidized, which is a great way to fund that open model we spoke about earlier, where your core members don't pay a fee, but the people around, like your vendors, do actually subsidize the activities delivered to them. So I'll leave you to read the paper for more of information on that, because I did want to talk just quickly about this last point. Being a not-for-profit doesn't mean you're operating in a loss. You still need to create a surplus. And I find there's a few things when it comes to generating revenue, whether it's around membership fees or otherwise, it really have limited associations from optimizing the revenue opportunities that they have. And basically, if you're looking, and if I'm going in with somebody who's got issues with revenue, one, I'm saying, do you have something to sell that people actually want to buy? And that research can actually help you to understand that. And then, no, I don't want to diversify revenue just yet. Before you look to diversify revenue, are you maximizing your existing opportunities? Because invariably, unless you've got fantastic automation, fantastic systems sitting behind it, there are opportunities going begging that you could optimize now that are less risk and much quicker in the turnaround than looking at diverse revenue sources. It's only once you've done those two items that then I'd say, right, well, what other revenue options could you be considering? But the other thing where I find associations are really struggling is sales is often considered a dirty word in the association space. And it's a real shame, because if you genuinely believe that people are better off as members than non-members, better off engaging with your association than not, then sales is actually just good customer service. And if you're going to do that well, you have to utilize the full raft of revenue generating channels that you have. So you'd have marketing automation, you might have external outbound call centers, you might have an internal, what we call transactional salesperson who looks after the quick sales, like selling events. You might have an internal high value who does big, large sponsorships, large partnerships, huge like joint memberships. You might have a business analyst who looks through to look to how you can optimize it. So there are lots of different things that you can do. Don't be limited by saying, oh, how sales is I just send an email, because that is probably the least effective thing that you can do. You need a full program for how do you optimize your business development to maximize making a positive difference in the lives of the people you serve. I have got in the paper, revenue generation ideas by function. We won't go through that now. But the second last slide that I'll have here is, if you're doing implementation, it's not BAU. It must be resourced effectively. And there's a whole range of things that you've got to consider. Getting your categories and your model set is only the first step. Where people either win or fall down on this is how well they implement it. And one of the fundamental things is your people, your culture, bringing people on the journey. You can't rush it. You've got to make haste slowly and bring people through. And please use your data. It is absolute BAU, business as usual. There's no excuse nowadays. When you can use AI, I can upload all my data sets into a GPT that I can produce through GPT. I can hook that up to my Xero and my membership systems, and I can talk to my data like it's a person. And that's really easy to set up. There's no excuse for not using data to guide all of these decisions so that you can have that confidence that you're actually moving in the right direction. And that is one of the reasons why you can use data as well to test. And you can see here with this example is actually real, where I was in an association and they said, oh, we'll get to 3,000 members in 3 years. We've got 2,100 already and huge room for growth. But when you actually extrapolated out their best ever number of members they'd recruited and their retention rate, if they kept going the way that they were doing, at the end of 3 years, they'd have 2,208 members. You've got to make decisions based on data, not somebody pulling it out of their bottom. So thank you so much, everybody. I apologize for going 6 minutes over time. I hope you found that useful. If you want more, subscribe to our e-newsers at svsonline.net.au. And if you have questions, feel free to drop me an email, because we can help out with everything from membership models, strategic planning, and how do you integrate AI across all of that, as well as that stakeholder research, that importance effectiveness stuff. Super, super valuable. So thank you so much for listening. If you have got any questions, pop them in the chat. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer any that people have. Thank you. Yes, and thank you to everyone in the chat there. I do feel I rushed this. Any questions? Oh, and yes, Tony, I am exhausted. That was a lot. It should have been a little bit longer than we gave it. I'm very excited about this new white paper coming out. I've been working on it literally for several years and have rewritten it like 6 different times. So that's all good. All right, well, if there is no questions, if you do think of anything, drop me an email and I would love to hear from you. The white paper, if you subscribe to my email, actually, I think Emily from Answers is going to send me a copy of the list, so everybody here will get a copy of the white paper once it's published, and we're just putting the finishing touches on at the moment. And you'll have everything that was in here, plus a whole lot more that I didn't think was going to go in, will be in there. And yes, Kirsten, the recording will be coming out to you. I think it will come out probably on Tuesday. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, everyone, good luck with your membership models. I'm going to head off now, but yes, let me know if you got any questions. Bye.